Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second season of Edge. This podcast is being recorded on Zoom, and we have with us Triveni Gandhi of Dataiku. Hi, Triveni. How are you? Good
I'm
to
good.
have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
So, Triveni, I need to begin first with your background, which is quite interesting. And you manage something extremely interesting and unique at Dataiku, that is ethics in AI. And it's the current hot topic and favorite for everyone. So, can we have a little bit about that and your background and what got you into ethics and AI per se?
Yeah, sure. So I am sort of a data scientist by informal training. My current title is responsible AI lead at Dataiku, but how I got here is a very sort of non-linear path. I did a PhD in political science, decided that I didn't want to stay in academia, and switched over into data and analytics. In the course of being a data analyst, I was mostly working with R. Then I learned some Python, learned machine learning, came to Dataiku as a data scientist, and over the past, 5.5 years, have expanded my sort of role and where Dataiku is going around the notion of AI and ethics. And so from data scientist came into this role of responsible AI lead. So it's a non-linear path, but one that makes sense when you look back on it.
What makes sense looking back in retrospect? Like they say, hindsight vision is always 2020. So in hindsight, what do you see and what makes sense in this whole journey? Because nobody would have imagined political science to responsible AI lead. First of all, it sounds so heavy, responsible AI lead. How did this whole transition happen?
Yeah, so again, hindsight being 2020, I think that as we're moving forward in the age of AI and all of these developments, there is a real need to have a socio-technical approach to these topics, right? One that's not just grounded in, oh, there's a technical problem, can we fix it? But one that's also grounded in what are the social implications, what are the implications for actual people who will be affected by AI, and AI, of course, being a very broad notion of analytics, machine learning, statistics, and then, of course, the Gen AI and all of that stuff. But the idea here is when you look back, right? When I look back at my trajectory, what I see really is that a sort of natural tendency to bring together and bridge that sort of social element, social sciences side with the technical. And I think that as we're moving into new regulations, new requirements for AI, that bridge is becoming more and more, solid and needed in order to be able to communicate between legal teams, compliance teams, regulators, and then the actual people who are putting products into place or building these products.
Right. Triveni, let's talk a little bit on, like I said, responsible AI. It is a conversation everyone has been having. Actually, I remember, at least from what I remember, 2015, when Facebook had started its early AI work, and everyone's talking about ethics. And then there was this whole conversation on social media algorithms and how they need to be responsible tech for good. All of that started. But responsible AI has been on and off for some time, and give or take 10 years, if I'm not wrong, or maybe more than that. I just want to understand, how does Dataiku and you view this whole space and view, when you talk about responsible AI, what do you particularly mean by that?
Yeah. So responsible AI is about taking some kind of, well, two things, right? Responsible AI is grounding your, sort of business objectives, what you're trying to achieve in some set of principles, right? Those principles, and we at Dataiku have our own sort of framework that we follow, which is called RAFT, and that stands for reliable, accountable, fair, and transparent. And so those are the four guiding principles that make up that vision. But then, the second part of responsible AI is not just the, okay, I've come up with some lofty principles, but also how do I take those principles, turn them into practice so that someone can actually execute on them? And then more broadly, how do those principles align, or sorry, how do those practices align with our processes and rules from an AI governance standpoint? And how do our systems actually execute on these practices, on these processes, in reality, right? So the operationalization, right, which is an ML ops story. So responsible AI is really focused on the data science part of the pipeline to say, okay, what are you doing to take those principles and put them into practice while you're building a machine learning model? But it lives in conjunction with broader AI governance practices and with the ML ops side, who are actually putting those things into production or operationalizing them across pipelines.
Just going back to your background, I feel, and this is a very personal, naive opinion, I feel social sciences might play a significant role here, right? Because your understanding of social norms, your understanding of different cultures, your understanding of politics and political sciences could play a role. So, can you talk a little bit about how the marriage of these two could work?
Yeah, so I think that like sometimes we come up as data scientists, we come up against a set of data or, the business asks us for a question to answer. And we just, kind of go in and say, okay, well, outcome is Y that we want, and here are all of my features, here are all of the inputs I can put in. Let's start building a model. But in reality, there's a lot more to that, right? We interrogate our data, we make sure it's aligned to the population that we're actually trying to build for. We check that there aren't any obvious biases or skews. And so we already do a lot of like the baseline work that is required in responsible AI, as a part of like the data science process. Where I think social sciences comes in is that like extra layer of, oh, actually, there might be nuances here that are not immediately are obviously visible. And I need to take the effort to think about what those might be. So, for example, I actually remember I was working with a client and they were working on some sort of insurance pricing model. And they said, our model looks pretty good. It's a 90% accuracy rate. I think that, what do you think? Is this something that we should put into production? And I just asked them to they were using our tool, Dataiku. I asked them to just go in to the model analysis and do a quick subpopulation analysis. So subpopulation analysis is saying, show me how well this model performs based on groupings within my data set. And I said, why don't you just do a subpopulation analysis of men versus women? And so using the data in the data set, you get that analysis, and we see that, in fact, the model is 95% accurate for men, only among the men, and 85% accurate only among the women. So on average, that becomes a 90% accuracy. But in reality, there's a big difference between how well the model's performing for these two groups, right? And you could think about that as applied across, someone's different age groups, race, if you're in a country that has that sort of breakdown, or even, again, gender, or even thinking about like education level, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which people form identities, and bringing those identities to bear within our machine learning and being able to say, okay, are we accounting for all those differences? Are we making sure that this model actually applies or does well across all those differences, is where we start bringing in that sort of social element to machine learning.
I'm just going back to basics here. Could you tell us why is it important for businesses? How can this actually impact businesses on both a positive and negative level? Because you rightly pointed out, when you look at 85% accuracy and 95% accuracy, it comes to an average of 90% accuracy, but that's not true. How could that translate into business impact? And whether it's positive or negative, how could that translate? And why is it so important to have unbiased data sets, data pools, or AI models?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking purely from a business perspective, it's the same reason why we chase good accuracy numbers, right? We don't want to miss true cases, and we don't want to falsely assign true cases to things that would otherwise be false, right? So if you're imagining it's a churn prediction model, if we're chasing down and trying to prevent churn, and our model is inaccurately saying that all of these people in age group 20 to 30 are about to churn, and it's inaccurate in doing so, we're spending a lot of time and money and business value on chasing down a group of people that are not actually going to churn, versus spending time on those customers that we actually need to pay attention to, but for whatever reason our model has decided don't need our attention. So there's a real loss of potential business, of potential, prevention of some sort of negative outcome if you're trying to prevent that, that can be avoided by actually interrogating your models in these different ways. And so, at a very pure business baseline, it's truly about actually getting the full value out of your model.
That's true. Now as we talk about the evolution of AI, there has been a very interesting conversation among, you have your tech geeks, and then you have your naysayers, and then you have your group of people who are on both sides of the fence who are talking about artificial general intelligence.
Mhm.
Do you think your AI is going to reach that level soon? Do you think it will take that time? Because currently all AI or all generated data, even Gen AI, the content or whatever it's generating is purely based on input and data that we give. But do you think that's going to change soon? Because 2017, I don't know if you remember this, Facebook had shut down its AI business because two of its AI models had created a language to talk to each other, which nobody understood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that at that point was scary. It still is scary now because it's something that I think nobody understands fully, and the implications of it can be quite interesting, for a lack of a better word. I just wanted to get your sense on it. Is it fact? Is it fiction? Or is it like Nvidia? They think it's going to be within the next 5 years.
Um, I, personally, I am not super convinced of this notion of like AGI or AI that operates on its own. But to be fair, I'm also not deep involved in that research. That's not the kind of work that I work on. So I can't say I don't know what they're actually working on. What I will say is that the question of whether or not AGI will exist is completely uninteresting to me. It's a dumb question, right? And no, no offense to you, Sindhu, but like the idea, of
Not
course,
at all offended. Don't worry.
the idea of, oh, AGI is coming, AGI is coming, what's going to happen? That is so irrelevant to the fact that there are real harms and issues with current day AI that are
Mm.
actually impacting people today, that like worrying about some Terminator future is not at all, like that's not what's important right now. That's like saying that like in 7 years' time, it's going to rain. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Ignoring the fact that it is currently raining and we should probably, open an umbrella, right? And so like, I just don't think that worrying about AGI, what I do think we should be worrying about is, okay, are we building towards systems that are meant to, prioritize fairness, robustness, privacy, transparency? Are we building those systems now? Because if we're building them now, whatever comes down the line will have to then also be aligned to those principles. So like getting those principles straight and putting on our guardrails now actually is a better way to encourage whatever future AI state there is to be safe and secure and human oriented.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the rains right now, but what are the current issues you see and how it can be fixed? Because, yes, nobody is talking much about it. There are conversations here and there, but everyone, I think, is so enthralled by the hype that is AI right now that there is little conversation on the problems that are currently there in the models and how those can be fixed.
Yeah, and I think that actually regulators have started taking a look at this, and especially in the EU has been
Mm.
concerned with AI and safe development of AI for many years now.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that is a level of understanding the risks of your models, right? If I'm building a model to predict if if the machinery in my plant is going to go offline soon, right? That's very important from a business value perspective. It's an important, valuable kind of analysis that needs to get done.
Mm.
But does it have an immediate impact on a human and their ability to access a good or something? Probably not. Now, there might be a safety perspective of wanting to make sure our employees on the manufacturing floor are safe. That's certainly there. But fundamentally, the question of, is this machine about to break, right? Predictive maintenance is not really affecting the day-to-day lives of human beings, right? Or of individuals. Contrast that to a model to predict if somebody's going to default on a loan and using that prediction as the decision point for whether or not to give that person that loan. That is now an immediate effect, right? That is whatever the results of that model are, it will immediately affect the person sitting on the other side
Yeah.
of the desk looking to get that loan. So that's definitely more high risk than like the predictive maintenance one. The predictive maintenance model might be lower risk in terms of effects on humans, but it is still highly valuable, right? And so because of those differences in risks, how we approach them, how we think about what needs to be done to improve those models or make sure those models are safe, is going to be different. And so when it comes to those high risk models, again, going back to the data, understanding that the data we're using is representative of the population that we're actually building for, recognizing that historical biases and other kinds of social bias will be present in the data, and knowing what those biases might be upfront so that when we build our model, we can say, okay, we want to build a model that does not replicate those biases and in fact moves us away from them.
Right. Last couple of questions. Triveni, I want to understand where do you see all this headed? Because there's a massive hype around AI. And like I was telling and joking with a colleague, someone in a completely different sector was like, oh, they're writing a guest post on, AI. And my first thought in my mind is, why would they write something on AI? And then I'm realizing that everyone seems to have an opinion on AI, and everyone seems to have an opinion on Gen AI. Everyone wants to build their large language models. That's just a lot that is happening right now. Where do you see this headed, and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense of all of this?
Yeah, so earlier I said that AI is very broadly defined, and it still is, right? AI is not just ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
That is one expression of a large language model that has been trained and all of that. You don't need to do generative AI in order to get value from your data, right? Analytic intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, statistics, these are all different kinds of broadly AI topics that can be used to build out benefit to a business. And so, for sure, there's an interest in LLMs, and there are some very good use cases for LLMs in the enterprise, right? And Dataiku has a number of sort of features and use cases to support our clients on their generative AI tracks. At the same time, we're also supporting with non-generative AI, right? We're also supporting with machine learning models, predictive or clustering or whatever it might be to actually help drive value back to businesses. So where this is going is it should be going more into a direction of what is it that I'm trying to do? What am I actually trying to achieve? And working from there towards what's the right method to achieve that versus saying, I want to use AI, make it work. And really starting with the business case and starting with the need, and moving from there.
Right. Okay. My last question to you. Where not where, but what advice would you give companies who are looking to incorporate AI in their systems but don't know how to? How can they responsibly, incorporate AI and use AI models?
Yeah. So, well, for the most part, they're probably already using data to drive some kind of analysis. So they already are using AI in my mind, right? That's analytics
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yes.
But to be more responsible moving forward, I think it's about first deciding, well, okay, what are our core principles here, right? Is it RAFT? Is it what's coming from NIST? Is it EU? Is it our own set of principles of like, maybe robustness instead of reliability or whatever it is. Um, so starting with those principles, but then being able to keep a sort of broader inventory as you're building out this new AI to say, okay, this is my new project. This is the expected value. This is the expected risk. These are the steps I'm going to take, or we're going to make sure the data scientist takes when they're building, because there's a known risk of we might accidentally deny someone a loan that shouldn't have been denied a loan, right? That kind of thinking. And so starting with those principles and doing sort of principle-led design thinking as you're building out new AI products is actually the first step, right? And then everything can cascade from that of, we know that these are our high-level goals and our high-level risk tolerances. what are we doing to make sure we're both achieving our goal and minimizing our risk accordingly. So starting with that is the real first step.
Great. Thanks a lot, Triveni. As always, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much for all your insights.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It was great chatting.